Ruin his suit. He doesn't deserve to stand beside me. He was good for the hard years, but not the final version. Would you believe those words came from a bride, aimed at her own groom, on the night before their wedding, and welcome back. Tonight's story is about the moment a man realizes the wedding was never the promise. It was the stage. What looked like stress, style, and last-minute pressure turned out to be something colder. Before we begin, this is an original fictionalized story written by me. Names, details, and events have been changed or created for storytelling purposes. AI is used for narration. Now, let's begin.
I heard it through a door I hadn't opened yet. That's the thing nobody tells you about betrayal. It doesn't come at you in the open. It doesn't give you a chance to brace. It comes through 3 inches of hotel door while your hand is still on the knob, while the sound of hair dryers and distant laughter fills the hallway, while you're just a guy who went back to get his phone charger. I'd left it in the shared prep room by accident. Walked back down the hall, rounded the corner, reached for the handle, and stopped. Celeste's voice, perfectly clear. Ruin his suit. He doesn't deserve to stand next to me looking like that. A pause. Then Sloane's voice, low and amused, like she was finishing a sentence she'd started a long time ago. I've been shrinking him for months. I stood there with my hand on the door handle and I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, not because I couldn't process it. The first sentence, as brutal as it was, I could almost survive. Brides got stressed. Things got said. It was the second sentence that took the floor out from under me, for months. Which meant there was a timeline I hadn't seen, a version of my own relationship I hadn't been allowed to read, and somewhere between what I thought was happening and what Sloane had just casually confirmed, there were months of things I'd watched without understanding what I was looking at. I let go of the handle. I walked back down the hall. I didn't get the charger. Let me go back far enough so you understand what kind of man I was before that door. I'm a commercial electrician, site supervisor. I go into buildings that are half finished and I go home with my hands dirty and my truck smelling like burned wire. I'm not the kind of man who enters rooms expecting people to turn around. Celeste is the kind of woman rooms turn around for. She wasn't always. Not when I met her. I met Celeste Warren on the tail end of the worst year of her life. Her event planning business had collapsed. A partner who cleaned out the account and disappeared. A client list that evaporated, an apartment she could barely keep. She was sharp and proud and furious and broke. I sat on her floor the night the electricity got cut off, and we ate takeout by phone flashlight, and she laughed once, genuinely, not performing it, and that was the first time I thought, I want to keep knowing this person. I wasn't rescuing her. I want to be clear about that. She didn't need rescuing. She needed stability for long enough to rebuild, and I happened to be someone who could provide it without making a performance out of it. I sat on her floor the night the electricity got cut off because the bill was 3 months behind, and we ate takeout by phone flashlight, and she laughed once. Genuinely, not performing it, and that was the first time I thought, I want to keep knowing this person. She rebuilt, completely. The version of Celeste that came out the other side was polished in a way I hadn't seen before. She could walk into a room and have it reading the way she wanted within 4 minutes. She became very good at luxury event planning and very good at controlling what people saw when they looked at her. She said yes when I proposed. Small dinner, no performance, she cried. I thought it was real. I still believe it was real. I just didn't understand what she needed me to be, not standing next to her, but slightly behind her, slightly softer, slightly less. The first wrong note was the suit. I found a midnight blue suit at a shop in the warehouse district. Classic cut, nothing flashy. The reason I wanted it was simple. The lapel button gap was exactly right for a pair of cufflinks my father left me when he died 8 years ago. Small, flat, silver with a faint crosshatch pattern. They were his and he would have been at that wedding, and wearing them was the closest thing I had to him being there. I sent Celeste a photo. She responded in under 30 seconds. No, that's not the line. I'm not sure about it. Can we look at other options? The phrasing was architectural, like I'd submitted a blueprint with a structural error. Within 2 minutes, Sloane was in the text thread. Avery House Bridal curated a full visual story for the wedding party, and she'd already pulled options that would work better. I said fine, it was one suit. What I missed was the word line. Not preference, line. Like there was an agreed-upon aesthetic I wasn't consulting, and the decision to override it had already been made before the photo was sent. From that moment, I wasn't choosing my appearance for my own wedding. I was being styled. The first fitting at Avery House was on a Tuesday in October. Sloane had pulled 3 options. None of them were the midnight blue. One read on camera like I'd forgotten to get dressed. One had lapels so narrow I'd have looked borrowed. The third was a deep champagne she kept calling editorial. She adjusted constantly, things I hadn't asked her to change. Pulled the vest line, switched the collar, began discussing pocket squares with Marcus, like I'd left the room. "Has he always been this particular?" she asked Marcus, in the voice people use when they want the subject to hear but want to be able to deny it. Marcus said, "He knows what he wants." Celeste was in the velvet chair, scrolling. She looked up once. Just trust her. She knows how to make a room read right. Then went back to her phone. I was standing on the fitting platform in front of a mirror angled so Sloane could see the full effect and I couldn't. The assistant crouched near my hem, a young woman named Maya Kim, pins in her mouth, hands at my trouser cuff, looked up fast when Celeste said that. Sharp, just a flicker. Then immediately back down. I stored that glance without knowing why. 2 weeks later, at a brunch with the wedding party, a cousin of Celeste said, laughing, "You're surprisingly calm for a groom." Someone else, "Maybe he's the guy who cares more about the cut than the bride." General laughter, the comfortable kind where no one owns it. I looked at Celeste. She did the slight half smile, the one that means the comment wasn't new to her. She turned to ask the server something. Jokes don't generate themselves. That phrasing had roots. And the roots were in something said over the past several months, watered enough to bloom naturally at a brunch table. The room had been taught a version of me before I walked into it. Then, 1 week before the wedding, I opened the garment bag to move my father's cufflinks to the inner pocket. They were gone. In their place, a pair of round, polished, generic silver cufflinks, the kind photographers love because they catch light without meaning anything. Sloane picked up on the second ring. Oh, yes, I made a swap. The originals were reading "very old man" in the test shots. I said, "Those were my father's." I called Celeste. When I said the cufflinks had been removed without my knowledge, she said, "Why are you making this emotional?" Not, I didn't know she took them. A redirect, turning a violation into a feeling, turning my anger into a symptom of something wrong with me. I drove to the studio, got them back. But they had touched the one thing I actually cared about, which meant they knew exactly how far they could go. When I pushed back harder, the language that came at me was surgical. "Celeste, it's one day. So why is this suddenly about your comfort? Celeste, you get weird when things aren't how you pictured them." And then Diane, her mother, 60 years of looking composed while buildings burned. Men who are secure don't get rattled by wedding details. That was the masterpiece. It didn't argue with me. It reframed the conversation so that having a point at all was the problem. If I was bothered, I was insecure. If I was insecure, everything I said could be attributed to that. At the rehearsal dinner, Celeste raised her glass and looked at Sloane. And to the one person who made sure we all looked like who we were supposed to be. Warm applause. I heard it differently. Who we were supposed to be. Not who we are. Not who we chose. Someone had decided that in advance. Someone had a version of what each person was supposed to look like in this story. I was in that story. I just wasn't the one with the pen. Back to the night before the wedding. After I heard those 2 sentences, I walked the corridor, took the elevator down, found the ice machine, and stood with a paper cup I never drank from. Marcus found me 6 minutes later. I told him what I'd heard. Both sentences exact. He was very still. Then, "We're going back up there." "No, Adrian, I want to know the full shape of it first." For months means a campaign, not a moment. I asked him the question that had been sitting under everything since the hallway. If she needed me smaller, if that was the point, why marry me at all? Neither of us had an answer. But the question changed the axis. This wasn't wedding stress. These weren't instruments. The question was what they were being used for. I told Marcus to call his tailor. Emergency alterations. Dark charcoal, clean, correct. Nothing editorial. Just right. He made the call at 11:43. The tailor picked up on the 4th ring. One more thing before we went back to our rooms. I wasn't canceling anything. I wanted to see what they brought to the venue in the morning. I wanted to see the full thing. "You're going to let them think it worked," Marcus said. "I'm going to let them finish." The text came to Marcus's phone at 6:14 in the morning. He handed it to me without a word. First message, a photograph. A garment bag on a studio rack, tag visible, Cole A, with a handwritten note at the bottom, hold until after ceremony. The suit they were delivering to the venue was not my suit. My suit was still at the studio, deliberately held, with the instruction written on the tag in ink. Second message, a screenshot of a group chat. Sloane, Celeste, 2 bridesmaids. Sloane, if he notices, call it nerves. Grooms get weird. Sloane, if he snaps, that tells us what he really is. Celeste, my family already thinks something's off with him. Celeste, don't give him anything that lets him shine. Today especially, I read it twice, set the phone down. They weren't just putting me in the wrong clothes. The wrong clothes were the trigger. If I noticed and reacted, if I made noise, got upset, caused a scene, every planted word from the past 4 months would activate. The room already knew how to read my reaction. The suit wasn't the trap. My reaction was a third message. Older, a direct exchange between just Celeste and Sloan 3 weeks prior. Celeste, he was good for the hard years. He is not the final version. Sloan, then marry the stability, not the memory. I put the phone face down and looked at the ceiling. There it was. She was marrying me because I was stable and she needed that. But I was the version of her life she was ashamed of. The years the electricity got cut. The years she took my help and needed it. I had been there for all of it. I had seen all of it. And she couldn't stand that I had. So she made me smaller, slightly off, slightly wrong, the subject of low-level questions about what was off about him, so the distance could be explained without her ever admitting what it was really about. I texted the number, "Who is this?" 4 words back, "Maya." From the studio. I looked at Marcus. "Tell Gil we pick up the suit at 8. I walked into that venue at 9:47 in dark charcoal. Gil had done good work. Clean, straight, correct. And at my left cuff, my father's cufflinks caught the light exactly the way they always had. Sloan was at the end of the corridor with a clipboard and a headset. She looked up when I came around the corner. Not collapse, she was too composed for that, but something in it misfired. A half-second delay. A recalibration. The specific look of someone whose plan has just produced an unexpected variable. Her eyes went to the suit, to the cufflinks. Back to my face, I kept walking. 20 minutes before the processional, Celeste found me near the fire exit. The dress was extraordinary, white, architectural. She was carrying her bouquet in both hands and still performing the smile for anyone who might glance over. She came close and spoke quietly. "What are you doing?" "Showing up in my own clothes." The smile stayed, but something behind her eyes changed. "Don't do this here." "Not." What happened? Not. Is something wrong? The instinct was containment. She didn't want to understand what I'd found. She wanted to manage where it happened. I said, "Okay." She studied me a moment, then walked back. I stood in the corridor and understood something for the first time. She was not surprised by the suit. She was surprised by my face. Because my face wasn't rattled, and that was not the face she'd planned for. The ceremony started on time. Every chair full, music up. Celeste appeared at the doors, and the room stood. She walked the aisle like she owned every foot of it, which she did. She stopped at the altar. We looked at each other. I thought, she is genuinely beautiful and genuinely capable and genuinely ashamed of who she was before she became this, and that shame is what got us here. The officiant welcomed the room. The usual warm introduction. Then we'll now move to the vows. Celeste took a breath. She'd written her own. To be fully seen and fully chosen. She got to seen and I said, quietly and clearly, "No." In ceremony silence it carried to every corner. Not loud, just precise. The officiant stopped. Celeste stopped. The room stopped. "Not while you pretend you ever wanted that." Her face went very still, calculating fast whether this could be recovered. Whether there was a version of the next 60 seconds that didn't unravel everything. I didn't give her the 60 seconds. "Last night, I heard you ask Sloan to ruin my suit. This morning, I found out the real suit was never sent. It's still at the studio. Tagged hold until after ceremony in writing." I paused. But the suit was never the point. The point was making me look wrong enough that if I reacted, you could call it proof of something. You've spent months building that. Every casual comment about what was off about me. Every redirect when I tried to say something real. The whole thing was arranged, so that by today, the room already knew how to read me wrong. Sloan, from the front row. "This is insane. This is not." I didn't look at her. "You spent months teaching people to ask what was wrong with me, so no one would ask what was wrong with this." The room shifted. Not chaos, something more precise. The particular stillness of a crowd simultaneously reassessing what they thought they saw, and then the side door opened. Maya Kim walked in, still in her work clothes, Avery House logoed top, black pants, carrying a garment bag. The name tab was visible from 10 feet, Cole A. She didn't speak. She walked directly to Marcus, handed him the bag and a paper alteration ticket with a studio timestamp, and said, "He never got the one he paid for." The room stopped arguing about feelings and started looking at a physical object. Marcus held the suit up just long enough, then crossed to the front row and handed his phone to Celeste's father. After a moment, Celeste's father passed the phone to Diane. She read. Her posture didn't change, but her face did, a very slight settling, like something held at tension had finally released. Celeste watched her mother read. There was a long moment. Then Celeste said, quietly, Not to the room, not to me, the words just falling out of her. "You're humiliating me." I looked at her. The white chairs, the arch of flowers, the candles, the whole beautiful architecture she'd constructed, the room full of people she'd invited into her story. That was the plan. It just landed on the wrong person. I reached into my jacket pocket, took out the ring, set it on the vow book in the officiant's hands. Then I looked at Marcus, and Marcus nodded, and we walked back down the aisle. The room split three ways. One section went silent, people rapidly replaying months of small moments and seeing them differently. A joke at a brunch. A something-off observation passed down a table. They were seeing the architecture underneath now and understanding they'd been inside it. Another section scrambled for order. Diane reached Marcus near the side exit. This could have been handled differently. Marcus looked at her steadily, so could the sabotage. She didn't respond. Turned and walked back toward the front. Somewhere in the back, a bridesmaid was crying. Not the kind of crying that happens when a wedding falls apart. Quieter, more confused. I'd learn later it was Lori, who had been in the group chat, who had laughed at the brunch jokes, who had passed along the something-off framing without once asking me a direct question. She was crying because she'd just realized she'd been a spoke in a wheel she hadn't seen. Sloane tried to take Maya by the arm and steer her toward the exit. Maya didn't move. She stood exactly where she was and waited. Sloane left alone. In the days that followed, certain things settled. The house closing, Clintonville, under contract since July. I called the realtor that afternoon and pulled out. The deposit was a calculable loss. The alternative was worse. The vendor network circulated what had happened before the reception venue even finished setting up the cocktail hour that never got used. By Monday, 3 people in the bridal industry had texted Sloane asking to confirm or deny. The portfolio feature she'd planned, her centerpiece for a magazine pitch, went nowhere. I moved my things out over 2 days. Marcus came and didn't talk much, which was exactly right. I contacted a lawyer about the joint account and the shared lease and started separating cleanly. Celeste texted me once, 4 days later. "You could have said something to me privately." I read it, put the phone down without responding. There was nothing in that sentence that was actually about me. She wasn't asking why I hadn't talked to her. She was asking why I'd chosen a public moment. She was still thinking about the room. I keep coming back to one sentence. He was good for the hard years. He is not the final version. She had spent 2 years being small and struggling and needing things. She rebuilt into someone entirely different, and the man who had been there for all of it was now standing next to the rebuilt version, and I was evidence. A living reminder that she had been that person. Every time she looked at me, she was looking at a witness. She couldn't erase the witness, so she made the witness smaller. Slightly off, slightly difficult, the subject of low-level questions about what was wrong with him, so the distance could be explained without her ever admitting what it was actually about. She didn't want me to disappear, she wanted me to shrink. I don't think she knew how clearly she'd worked that out. Some of it was conscious. Some of it was the logic of shame doing what shame does, which is protect itself at the cost of everything nearby. It doesn't make the suit less missing. It doesn't make the screenshots less real. It doesn't make the year I spent watching a woman I loved be quietly given permission by the person she trusted most to see me as a problem instead of a partner. None of that changes, but it helps me understand what I actually lost, which was not a marriage. I lost a marriage that was never going to be what I thought it was. That's a different kind of loss. It doesn't hurt less. It hurts more precisely. What I'd had for 3 years was a foundation that someone built on and then decided to hide under the floor. I was the floor. I wasn't in the plans for the house above it. Marcus asked me, about a week later, if I was okay. I said, "I'm clean." He looked at me. "That's not the same thing." "No, but it's what I've got right now, and it's real, and I'll take it." He nodded. We drove the rest of the way without talking. I had the cufflinks in my jacket pocket, not to look at, not to perform a grief about, just to have them there. My father had been a man who showed up, did what he said he would do, and didn't make noise about it and expected that to be enough. I used to think the problem with men like that was we didn't speak up fast enough. I spoke up. At exactly the right moment, with exactly the right evidence, in front of exactly the right room. The problem wasn't the silence. The problem was who I'd chosen to trust with it. The work now is simpler and harder, and mine. Figure out what I want from the next version of my life, without someone else deciding what I'm supposed to look like in it. I'm starting with the suit. Not the midnight blue one, that's still on a rack somewhere at Avery House, a detail in someone else's failed story. But I've been thinking about having something made, starting from the measurements I actually have, with the cufflinks already factored in. No fitting platform angled so I can't see the mirror. No one asking if I've always been this particular. Just a man, in his own clothes, in his own frame, taking up exactly the space he takes up. That's enough. That's where I'm starting.
Okay, that's where today's story ends. And honestly, here's what I want to say. For me, this story was never really about the suit. It was about humiliation being planned in advance, and about someone slowly being made smaller so another person could feel bigger. That's the real lesson here. Anyone who needs to damage your dignity to protect their image was never building a future with you. But that's just my view. What do you think was worse, the ruined suit, or the months of shaping how everyone saw him? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next story.